So when I took this apart earlier, I found O-rings riding the valve stems between the valve guide and the spring retainer. Here's an example of one that I removed. Many of them had broken from age, looking like that. My local guy sold me these to replace those. These are very small and very difficult to get over the valve stem. Now, from the internet, I understood that the O-rings are supposed to go under the spring retainers. And I assembled it that way, but the spring retainer doesn't pop all the way up. It just gets jammed on the rubber O-ring. So I'm going to put that back together so you can see what I'm describing. Well, maybe I got it this time. The O-ring is in there. I'm not exactly sure what side of the spring retainer it wound up on, because it can pass through the retainer. But for now, I'm going to keep going. Figure this out. So here we're looking at another intake valve. I've got the stem seal installed. Just an easy push on with the finger pressure. I hope it stays on the valve guide. It seems kind of precarious. And you can see there's room under the keepers for this O-ring. So obviously I'll take the keepers off, I'll put the springs back on, I'll put the valve spring retainer back on, I'll compress it, and I'll put the keepers in. Where exactly this O-ring is winding up is not clear after that process. It may be that the valve spring retainer is pushing the O-ring out of this groove and onto the shaft. The previous guy just installed the O-rings on the shafts, and I don't see how that would do any good whatsoever. So I've got the O-ring in the keeper groove on the valve stem, and I'm going to compress the spring. And I can see the valve spring retainer is pushing the O-ring now. It's coming down and it can't get past it. Oh, and it just pushed it right out of the groove. See, there's no O-ring in the groove now. So where these O-rings are winding up, I have no idea. I'll tell you what, I'm going to start again. So I've got the spring compressed now. I'm going to try and put the O-ring on at this point. So now the O-ring is in the keeper groove. What I predict is going to happen, I'll put the keepers on, kind of squeezing in there with the O-ring. Fell off of my wood stand here. Okay, so there's the keepers and there's the O-ring underneath. I'm going to release this. Maybe that's going to work. I think I found the secret. You got to do it just like I did there. I think this is coming back far enough for me to be confident the keepers aren't going to fly out. And maybe I'll buy those cotters that go around this, or wrap some safety wire around it. So here's one that I installed the O-ring before I installed the valve spring retainer, and you can see it got pushed out of the groove and it's somewhere riding the valve stem now. So I'm going to take this one apart and do it over. I think I've got a method that works now. I've got a system here. I've got the spring compressed, I've got the O-ring in the keeper groove. I bring in the keepers, I snap them in place, kind of squeezes the O-ring a little bit. Then I'm going to release the valve spring compressor, and I'll just believe that the O-ring stays in the groove and it doesn't wind up on the valve stem where it would be completely useless. And I've got a real concern now that this spring retainer isn't popping all the way up because the rubber is possibly blocking its path. But for now I'm going to keep going. So once again, here you can see I've got the O-ring installed in the retainer groove. I've installed one retainer and it just kind of squeezes the O-ring a little bit. Here comes the second retainer. Just kind of comes in, pushes down on the O-ring a little bit. Gets in where it needs to be. And the trick here is to release this spring, not have the O-ring pop out and get on the valve stem. To my grasp of the situation, it needs to stay in the keeper groove to do any good. It's supposed to be in there keeping oil from following the keepers onto the valve stem and into the engine. Every car on the road except MG does without this, but I just thought I'd play the game.